It's Tuesday, and in my hand, I'm holding this little blue car with a bow. It doesn't exist in real life, not just on the internet. We're talking about hatchbacks. This is a hatchback, and if you don't know, a hatchback won Best SUV of the Year.
Everywhere I go,
Why not?
Really want to know
Why not?
who I is and who I be. They stop.
Remember that one time where Darren Doan was like, "The world is flipping." Oh,
I do remember that.
Only knew. Oh,
I do remember
if you
him
only
saying
knew.
that very distinctly. Actually, that's a conversation that, sometimes you have a conversation and you remember it a lot. I remember that one a lot.
All the time. All the time. Hey, we got a lot of things going on. We are Wheels Up. We're hanging out with the whole entire 800% club. If you don't know,
All 800 of them.
All 800. Glenn Lundy has his community of dealers, and they go do crazy things once a quarter. So,
They invited us to go do crazy things.
They did. They're going to be flying around in skin tight jumpsuits this afternoon.
Well,
so
I don't know if I will be, but they may be. We will be live podcasting with some of the great dealers and industry partners from across the country with our boy Michael Cirillo. I can't wait to see him later. We get to be in person. If you don't know, we have a podcast.
He's just a perfect armrest.
It's
unbelievable.
Go there. We have a podcast called Auto Collabs where we got together in Philly and did intros and outros, and then we did some interviews. This is the first time since ASOTUCon we've all been in the same place, and this is the first time the three of us have ever interviewed someone in person, all three of us and one interviewee. Boy, if you want to see some fireworks, maybe we'll let the person we interview get a word in edgewise. We'll see. I plan on laughing a lot. That's all I know.
Yes, absolutely. Hey, if you love podcasts, you can check out our last episode of ASOTUCon Sessions, which were recorded live at ASOTUCon, actually.
So good.
And Ryan Osteen, CEO of Goobagoo, was hanging out with us. And so, go check that out. ASOTUCon Sessions. But enough about podcasting and content. We got something to talk about, Paul.
Oh, we do?
We got something to talk about.
What are we talking about today?
Paul, for years and years, sometimes we use words, and these words relate to something.
I think,
and then sometimes, every once in a while, someone just goes, I don't think that word should exist in that way. And that's just how Hyundai feels, because apparently a hatchback can win SUV of the year. Recently, the Ioniq 5, Hyundai's EV vehicle that looks kind of hatchbackish, kind of SUV-ish, has won the SUV of the year. And this story isn't so much about the fact that they are SUV of the year, even though Motor Trend said no matter what class they were in, it would be a vehicle that they would recognize because of its drivability, its accessibility, the ease of getting in and out, the driving style, all of that type of stuff. But the fact that every motorhead, every person that's ever thought, hey, what's a hatchback? When they get the idea of hatchback in their head, Paul, it kind of looks like an Ioniq 5.
It does.
That picture up one more time.
I have a little hatchback coming up here.
I'm
a big hatchback fan.
Look at this thing.
There it is.
Kind of, it's got the little.
There's nothing about that picture that looks like an SUV. It looks like a slightly larger Volkswagen Golf.
Oh man, it's a
which is a hatchback.
Okay, so here we go. We're gonna throw a couple quotes. I did a little research, read through the Jalopnik article, but Motor Trend said, regardless of how any individual defines the term, there's no denying that our 2023 SUV of the year handily meets the diverse needs of the compact SUV segment it competes in, and then some. See, the long story short, according to Jalopnik, you and I may think of today's SUVs as practical family haulers, but in the eyes of the NHTSA, which is the organizing body around what vehicles fall in which classes, they're work vehicles first and foremost. So I did some research, and essentially it's there's a bunch of things like ground clearance, passenger capacity, rear capacity, including how easy it is to get items in and out of the back hatch. So does this work as a work/utility vehicle? So utility vehicle, does it have that functionality? And even Hyundai, in a call with a reporter, expects the reasons that they're calling the Ioniq 5 an SUV because of the all-wheel drive capacity, large passenger volume, 2,300 pound towing capacity, of which the majority of compact SUVs don't even come close to. They normally range around 1,600 to 1,800 in towing capacity.
EV working for you.
High seat positioning, being the rear seat especially kind of sits up. and then the ease of loading the rear cargo area for purposes of utility. So they did their homework.
I take it back. That sounds like an SUV to me.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? Here's the real thing. Is like if you thought direct to consumer and agency model were concerning, now you got to figure out what kind of car you're selling.
I'd like to buy an SUV. No, that's a hatchback. No, it's an SUV.
No, it's an SUV.
No,
Right. I think, well, and I think that this is what's interesting is because like vehicle design and vehicle structure and even the way that vehicles tow is adjusting so much, right?
Yeah.
And even
the towing thing for real.
You see like the way that these vehicles are structured in their capacity, especially in the new EV landscape, you just look at it totally differently. Every single vehicle kind of stands on its own. And even just the design and shape of these vehicles is altogether different than we've ever seen before. So I think and this for me as a salesperson, like coming from the sales is just, it's really listening to the customer and going like, what do you need a car to actually do? And not just taking the label and putting it on what's going to sell into some segment.
The whole SUV thing is relatively new. And it was the first SUV. Was it the Wagoneer or was it the Bronco? I can't remember. It was one of those, but
like late 70s or 80s or something like that.
It was like one of the first Broncos came out, and that thing was huge, right? But that was an SUV, and they're like, well, how? It's not a truck, but you can sit in it in a back seat and a third, right? And so like the definitions, and then we moved through the era where it was just SUVs, right? No one's making sedans anymore. But that little, like, I remember my wife and I rented, like, I can't remember, it was like the little Cadillac one or whatever at one point, and I sat in that thing. I was like, this is the smallest thing I've ever been in my life.
You're like, I feel like a car would be bigger, right?
I really did feel like that. I really did. And so, yeah, like you said, man, the definitions are always changing of this stuff, but really dialed in to what your consumer is like saying they need, not necessarily the category, because who the heck knows the category. It's just up for change. Speaking of things that are changing.
Stop.
Segue.
Time.
It's a fun one.
Paul, real quick. Did you know that Elon is supposed to be finishing buying Twitter on Friday?
Elon who? Just kidding.
Elon Musk.
I'm totally kidding.
I know that sounds completely random.
Friday's the date that the Twitter deal is supposed to close?
It's supposed to close. And I know that sounds completely random, but Paul, take it away on our next story.
Oh, that's good. That's good. And as a side note, he said he's going to fire 75% of the people that work there. We never covered that story, but that actually happened. Okay. Well, speaking of Twitter, which may or may not be owned by Elon Musk on Friday, Ford CEO Jim Farley took to Twitter to make a bit of a surprise announcement. Here it is. The F-150 Lightning extended range is even faster than the company originally announced. So the tweet read this: update, the 0 to 60 mile an hour speed for the F-150 Lightning with the hashtag F-150 Lightning. Good use of the hashtag in the well done, Jim. With extended battery range is now under 4 seconds. Lightning fast, lightning emoji, checker flag. So originally the company said a ballpark of 4.5 seconds. Obviously this is a half a second might not be a lot to you, but when you're like under 5 seconds, 0 to 60, a half second improvement is substantial. So whether or not
that's
truck.
Nuts.
Big truck. Yeah. I mean, I've been in like a Tesla Model 3 moving quick, but being in something that moves, it's that big, that moves that fast, has got to be an experience. We don't know if it's intentional or not, if they knew this was the case and just didn't release it, but this just does add to like that public discourse and the momentum, the good news that's coming out around the Ford F-150 Lightning. People seem happy with it. Here's another thing, by the way, it's faster, gets people all excited. And they're going to have to stay excited still for a while, because with 8,760 units delivered in total as of the beginning of this month, there's no telling when the original 200,000 plus orders will be fulfilled as production continues to ramp up. There's still a couple F-150s parked in Kentucky, just waiting for a ship.
Yeah, just the regular old gas ones. They got plenty of them out there. So getting to 200,000 is maybe not going to be as lightning fast as the vehicle actually is, because of like things like, show them the image of this Kentucky Motor Speedway. You got Fords on Fords out there. Not just F-150 Lightnings, probably not even F-150 Lightnings. They're pushing those to the front of the line, but it just begs the question, like, there's all this energy around these EVs, especially the Ford F-150 Lightning. Like, and so cool to see some of the technology driving things like a under 4-second truck, 0 to 60 that's production ready. That's unbelievable. But I guarantee it's going to drive up like interest. It's going to drive up, just people wanting that car. So
we're talking about it.
I mean, yeah, we're talking.
Here we are talking about it.
Man, I'm waiting to see how these manufacturers continue the conversation with so many people that want these cars and are desiring this change. It's going to be it's a big thing to ask for sure.
Speaking of people desiring change,
stop. Segue
time.
I don't mean the change synthesis from what I mean literal change, quarters and dimes and nickels. Well, not anymore, but in a way. Over the past 36 months, tipping at local food establishments has become much more of a norm. New studies examine how people feel about the social pressure that comes with that all infamous when they flip the little screen over, and sometimes it feels like they give you the puppy dog eyes, right? Or maybe they look away because they feel as awkward as I do.
You know what happens to me? They just turn away and walk away.
Yeah,
but like,
gotta be not
when you
right?
flip that thing back, they're like, "This guy."
There are a couple questions, a couple questions for you to answer. And so, basically, these new studies are showing 67.7% of Americans feel pressure when a tip is prompted on a screen. And 44.8% they say they only tip because the screen shows up. So meaning like, hey, this wasn't something they were planning on tipping, right? They didn't think it was a tippable experience, and now they feel pressure to tip. Another survey by Time to Play revealed that 86.8% of consumers feel uncomfortable when prompted. That's the moment we were talking about. The screen flips, can't answer that. They walk away. You stand there. About half of people, this is an interesting one. So the pandemic has seemed to really change the behaviors. About 53% of people say they have tipped for takeout currently versus before the pandemic. Only about 24% people say they would tip for takeout. So we got a couple. Oh, there's one more. Well, I think one more really important point, and we'll get to this because you and I are both kind of coffee snobs. Almost twice the amount of people will leave a tip for a local coffee shop versus a big chain like Starbucks, which isn't surprising.
Oh yeah.
So tell me, Kyle, we need to know, and we need to know what your behaviors are when this happens. And I realized when I was going through this story, I don't know how my wife responds to these situations.
Oh, my wife hates it. It's the worst. It is like,
all right. So tell me, break it down.
If I'm there, she's just like, take care of the thing.
Here, you do this. You do this.
But so for me, this is, I'm a typical tipper. Like I've been in the restaurant industry, so I am glad to lean in and tip. And I think that, I know that most of those, and I know a bunch of people that work at coffee shops, and there is, especially in the coffee shop world, there is a reliance on the tip for their average income to equal out to what it needs to be based on like their expected like where the employer kind of says they'll sit in. It's required to get tips. Like that's the only way that works. Now, some of these other places, the ones that really throw me off are the ones that like before the new point of sale system, I know they didn't have tipping available. And now they've transitioned to like a Square or a Clover or something like that. And now they're asking for tips. That's the weird one. Cause I'm like, what changed about what you're doing? But
they realized that 67.7% of Americans will actually press a button.
The one that gets me, and this one is the hard one, especially like when you go into coffee shops, is the interesting thing about these tipping mechanisms is they are always balanced on like what the dollar amount is on how they ask you to tip. So like basically anything under $10, they prompt a $1, $2, or $3 option, right? And so you just like select one of those. But over that amount, they start charging because they typically expect that to be like the in-place experience. They start charging as a percentage. Well, for me, I'm always like buying bags of coffee and like one other thing that I forgot.
Oh, you're like, I just spent $40. Like,
it's the same output. because they're just still handing me the one
coffee bag myself. Right.
Exactly.
Then you got to press other amount, and then you're there for a while, which makes it look like you're overthinking, which increases the pressure. Like they're really going to study.
It's like
study this one.
You know, maybe we should run this tomorrow, and maybe people will research it. But there's also this new thing coming out about how the ask on the keep the change version of giving in the holiday season is extremely stressful for purchasers. And so
you want to round up or do you want to donate $2 to cancer research today? Or do you want to what I hear is this: do you want puppies to die?
That's what you hear without a doubt.
I'm like, no.
Here, and that's where people get stressed out, right? So I think I think what's interesting about this and the way that we can tie this down is how, two ways. One is go in understanding that these are people that are like asking for tips because it's something that changes the way that their income is structured. So understand that as community members. But two, also from a retail experience, every single moment counts in the way that someone perceives you as a purchasing experience. And so don't discount the fact that it may just be expected. Even though it's getting widely expected, it may not be the right thing for your retail experience.
That's the truth, man. That's the truth. I always try to over tip because I, like you, worked in the restaurant business for a long time. So it's for me, it's an easier to press the button. It does create awkwardness sometimes, especially in situations like that. I think that sometimes too, there's confusion. Where's the money actually going? Right? That person picked my bag up off the shelf and put it there, but it says leave a tip. Am I tipping the whole team? Which is a better feeling for me.
Right.
Than the person at the register. So I don't know, but it is a part of our modern retail matrix now, Kyle.
There it is.
Except at car dealerships. Ain't no tipping going on at car dealerships.
No, definitely not. Better not be doing that.
But if you're a car dealer or a car salesperson,
all the time, so
that's true. Or if you are wearing a dealership shirt, you should be a big tipper. Let me just say, you can show the community you really care just by leaving an extra $1 or $2 than everybody else, and they'll all of a sudden understand you're on their side.